Imagine that everything you believe you know about Jesus is merely the tip of the iceberg. What if I told you that the most powerful and transformative words ever spoken by the most influential man in history were deliberately erased from official records? Think for a moment, what would happen if we discovered today that Jesus' true teachings weren't about submission to a higher authority, but about awakening the infinite divine power that already exists within you? In 1945, an Egyptian peasant was digging in the arid soil near Nag Hammadi when his shovel hit something solid, a red clay jar. Inside it, 13 ancient manuscripts that would shake the foundations of Christian theology forever. Among these texts was the Gospel of Thomas, words of Jesus that the church decided you should never read. Whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death. This phrase opens the Gospel of Thomas, promising nothing less than the immortality of the soul for those who truly understand. Why would such an extraordinary promise be removed from the Bible you know? What is in these words that so terrified the builders of religion that they preferred to erase them from history? Today we'll dive into the depths of this forbidden knowledge, not as followers but as explorers, not as sheep seeking a shepherd, but as beings of light recognizing their own divinity. And in the end, you may realize that the deepest truth has been within your reach all along, buried not in desert sand, but under layers of dogma that have obscured your true spiritual nature. Stay with me for the next few minutes until the end, and I will reveal everything about Jesus' secret teachings that were deliberately removed from the Bible and have the power to completely transform your understanding of spirituality and your own divine potential. And if this content resonates with you, don't miss the opportunity to continue receiving knowledge that can transform your life. Subscribe to this channel now. Hit the notification bell to be notified of new videos. Give this video a like to strengthen this message, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Each interaction helps spread this ancient knowledge to more people who, like you, are ready to awaken. When Emperor Constantine convened the First Council of Nicaea in 325 after Christ, Christianity was at a decisive moment. Diverse interpretations of Jesus' teachings flourished throughout the Mediterranean world, each with its own scriptures and traditions. The official narrative tells us that the council aimed to unify the faith, establish a clear and accessible doctrine that everyone could understand. A necessary simplification, they say. But there is a much more disturbing theory. What happens when an empire wishes to control not just territories but also souls? What happens when spiritual power needs to be channeled to sustain an earthly hierarchy? You create a religion of obedience. You eliminate any trace of self-empowerment. You transform a spiritual revolutionary into a symbol of submission. Gnostic texts like the Gospel of Thomas, the Book of Enoch, the Gospel of Mary, and many others weren't simply edited, they were systematically eradicated. Those who preserved them, known as Gnostics, were persecuted, marginalized, and eventually eliminated. The word Gnostic comes from gnosis, direct knowledge in Greek. They believed that true spirituality didn't come from blind faith or obedience to authorities, but from inner knowledge, direct experience of the divine. Consider for a moment how threatening this idea would be to an emerging religious institution. If each person could find the divine within themselves, what would priests be needed for? If the kingdom of God was truly within each one, how could one justify grand temples, mandatory tithes, or submission to an external authority? The mathematics of power is simple. Dispersed knowledge means dispersed power. The sophistication of the Gnostic cosmology reveals another dimension of why these teachings were so threatening. Unlike the relatively straightforward narrative presented in Orthodox Christianity, Gnostic texts describe a complex universe with multiple levels of reality. They speak of archons, cosmic rulers, or forces that create and maintain the illusion of the material world to keep human souls trapped in ignorance. The physical world, in this view, isn't the perfect creation of a benevolent God, but rather an imperfect copy created by lesser divine powers. This radical reframing would have completely undermined the authority of those claiming to represent God's will on earth. After all, if the material world itself is a kind of prison or illusion, what authority could its rulers truly claim? This cosmology bears striking similarities to Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and Hinduism, suggesting that early Christianity may have been far more integrated with Eastern wisdom traditions than the Church has acknowledged. The political implications of these teachings extend beyond religious control and into the realm of imperial governance. In the ancient world, religion and politics were inseparably intertwined. The emperor's authority was understood to be divinely sanctioned, a reflection of cosmic order. By establishing a version of Christianity that emphasized hierarchy, obedience, and the mediation of divine power through authorized channels, Constantine created not just a unified religion, but a powerful tool for imperial control. The Gnostic emphasis on individual spiritual authority, direct access to divine wisdom, and the questioning of material reality would have undermined not just the Church, but the very foundations of imperial rule. It's no wonder that later Roman emperors like Theodosius would go on to criminalize pagan practices and heretical Christian sects, ultimately making Orthodox Christianity the mandatory state religion of the empire. The persecution didn't stop there. Over the following centuries, any resurgence of these teachings was met with fierce repression. The Cathars in medieval France, the alchemists during the Renaissance, the mystics of various traditions, all suffered at the hands of those who feared the liberation of human consciousness. Esoteric knowledge was forced to hide, encoded in symbols, parables, and secret rituals, transmitted only to initiates considered worthy and ready to receive it. But truth has a curious quality. No matter how much we try to suppress it, it always finds a way back to the surface. Like water that penetrates through the smallest cracks, the original teachings of Yeshua, his Hebrew name before the Hellenization to Jesus, continued to inspire spiritual seekers throughout the centuries. And now, in the information age, these forbidden texts are finally available to everyone. The question is, are we ready to understand what they really mean? If those who lead you say to you, "See, the kingdom is in the sky," then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say that it is in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you and it is outside of you. These words of Jesus, preserved in the Gospel of Thomas, reveal a truth that transcends any religious dogma. Divinity is not something distant, separate from us, something we must seek in celestial realms after death, or in sacred places controlled by priests. Divinity is our very essence. It is within us and around us in every atom of existence. Think of the revolutionary implication of this. For centuries, we have been conditioned to look upward, to feel small, sinful, in need of intermediaries to connect us with the divine. We have been taught to seek salvation outside ourselves, to fear posthumous judgment, to live in constant fear of not being worthy. But what if Jesus' original message was exactly the opposite? What if he was trying to show us that we are already divine, that the kingdom we so desperately seek is already our birthright? When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. This is the truth that sent tremors through the corridors of power. You are not a servant begging for divine crumbs. You are a being of light, temporarily forgetful of your true nature, invited to remember your origin and your infinite potential. Jesus wasn't asking for worship. He was showing the way for us to become like him. Be passers-by, he says in the Gospel of Thomas, suggesting that our earthly identity is just a passage, a temporary experience within a much greater journey. The linguistic nuances in the original Coptic text of the Gospel of Thomas add profound dimensions to this understanding that don't survive translation. For instance, the Coptic word for kingdom, Montero, carries connotations not just of a place or realm, but of a state of being or consciousness, sovereignty itself. When Jesus speaks of the kingdom within, he's referring to an inner state of divine awareness and self-realization that transcends our normal perception. Similarly, when he speaks of knowing yourself, the Coptic implies not intellectual knowledge, but intimate recognition, the kind of knowing that comes from direct, experience rather than conceptual understanding. This experiential dimension of spirituality stands in stark contrast to faith-based religion, suggesting that early followers of Jesus were engaged in spiritual practices designed to facilitate direct perception of divine reality, much like Eastern meditation traditions. The historical context of Jesus' ministry adds another layer to this interpretation. He lived in a time when apocalyptic Judaism was widespread. Many Jews expected the imminent end of the world and the establishment of God's kingdom on earth through divine intervention. But the Jesus of Thomas seems to subvert this expectation entirely. Instead of pointing to a future cosmic event, he directs attention to the present moment and the divine reality already accessible within. This would have been a radical departure from prevailing religious expectations, offering an immediate path to liberation rather than a distant hope. Considered alongside archaeological and historical evidence that Jesus may have been influenced by Eastern wisdom traditions possibly brought to the region by trade routes, we can see how his teachings might represent a deliberate fusion of Jewish mysticism with Eastern concepts of non-duality and self-realization. When Jesus says, "I am the way," could he be saying, "Be like me, live like me, awaken as I have awakened"? Could it be an invitation to spiritual equality, not subservience? This understanding changes everything. Christ's nature transforms from an exclusive external savior to an example of the potential inherent in every human being. His very name, Yeshua, carries this meaning. In Hebrew, it means salvation or liberation. Not a man who grants salvation, but the very process of awakening to our divine nature. True salvation is not being rescued by someone else. It is a remembering, a recognition of who we truly are. And this awakening is what spiritual masters of all authentic traditions have sought to facilitate. The Gnostics believed that this same message was at the heart of all genuine spiritual traditions, just expressed in different languages and symbols, according to the needs of different cultures and times. Spiritual awakening was never the property of any specific religion. It is the birthright of every consciousness that emerges in the universe. He who seeks, let him not cease seeking until he finds. And when he finds, he will be troubled. And when he is troubled, he will be amazed, and he will reign over the all. This passage from the Gospel of Thomas reveals something fundamental about the spiritual journey. It is not a path of constant comfort, but of profound transformation that often passes through the disturbance of everything we thought we knew. Genuine spiritual awakening is rarely peaceful. It shakes the foundations of our identity, challenges our most deeply held beliefs, and forces us to face truths that may initially be uncomfortable. Why do we become troubled when we find the truth? Because we realize how long we've lived in illusion. Because we understand that we've built identities based on limitations that never really existed. Because we see, perhaps for the first time, how much we've ceded our power to unnecessary external authorities. But this disturbance is just a stage, not the final destination. Beyond it lies wonderment, the awe before the vastness of our being and the infinite potential now revealed. And then, Jesus says, he will reign over the all. Not as a tyrant who dominates others, but as a conscious sovereign of his own reality, a creator who takes responsibility for the world he manifests through his choices, thoughts, and actions. It is the end of victimization, the end of blame projected onto external forces, the beginning of true spiritual responsibility. The psychological depth of this teaching becomes apparent when we consider it alongside modern depth psychology and neuroscience. What Jesus described as the process of seeking, finding, being troubled, and ultimately reigning over the all closely parallels what psychologists like Carl Jung described as the integration of the shadow and the process of individuation. The initial disturbance that comes with truth reflects what happens when unconscious material becomes conscious. It disrupts our comfortable but limited self-concept. Neuroscience now confirms that transformative insights actually create new neural pathways, sometimes accompanied by temporary disorientation, as the brain reorganizes itself around a more expansive understanding of reality. This suggests that Jesus wasn't just offering poetic spiritual guidance, but was describing with remarkable accuracy the actual psychological and neurological processes involved in radical transformation of consciousness. This teaching also illuminates the nature of spiritual authority in a way that directly challenged the power structures of his time and ours. In ancient societies, including Rome and Judea, authority was understood to flow from the top down, from God to the emperor or high priest, then down through the social hierarchy. The idea that each individual could reign over the all through their own conscious awakening completely inverts this model. It suggests that true authority comes not from external position or title, but from the degree of consciousness one embodies. This explains why genuine spiritual teachers throughout history have often appeared humble in worldly terms, while radiating an unmistakable authority that transcends social position. It also explains why institutional religion has so consistently opposed mystical traditions. They represent a fundamental threat to hierarchical authority by locating spiritual power within the individual rather than the institution. Before we continue with these profound revelations, I want to remind you that we are unveiling knowledge that has been actively suppressed for centuries. If you're feeling a connection with these truths and want to support the dissemination of this ancient knowledge, take a second now to like this video and share it with someone you know needs to hear this. Your action now could be the catalyst for someone else's awakening. Each like and each share helps this knowledge reach more people ready to awaken. Now let's continue our journey through the mysteries of the Gospel of Thomas. The disciples asked Jesus, "Tell us, how will our end be?" Jesus answered, "Have you discovered the beginning, that you ask about the end? For where the beginning is, there will the end be. Blessed is he who will take his place in the beginning. He will know the end and will not taste death." Here, Jesus challenges our obsession with future and past, our constant escape from the present moment. The beginning and the end are not separate points on a timeline. They are dimensions of consciousness accessible here and now. When we awaken to our true nature, the beginning, we already contain within us the full realization, the end. There is no journey in space or time. There is only the unfolding of consciousness recognizing itself. Not tasting death doesn't mean physical immortality, but the transcendence of identification with the body and temporary personality. When we identify with our eternal essence, the observer, pure consciousness, we realize that we were never born and will never die. Birth and death are merely transformations, like waves that rise and return to the ocean without ever ceasing to be water. There is light within a man of light, and he lights up the whole world. Our true nature is not just illuminated, it is illumination. We don't just receive light, we are light, and that light doesn't remain contained, but radiates to all existence. How could such teaching be tolerated by institutions that wish to control access to the divine? How could priests and emperors maintain their power over people who recognize themselves as autonomous lights, as direct manifestations of divinity? If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. This passage from the Gospel of Thomas contains one of the most powerful psychological and spiritual truths ever articulated. What we keep in shadow, what we deny, what we repress, does not disappear. It transforms into a destructive force in our lives. Salvation doesn't come from following externally imposed rules, but from honestly integrating all aspects of our being, bringing them into the light of consciousness. Carl Jung, the pioneer of depth psychology, would reach similar conclusions, almost 2,000 years later, speaking about the need for shadow integration. What Jesus was teaching wasn't religious dogma, but a sophisticated spiritual psychology that understood human nature in its totality. Why do you wash the outside of the cup? Do you not understand that he who made the inside is the same one who made the outside? Jesus continually challenged the hypocrisy of external religiosity that ignores inner transformation. True spirituality is not measured by appearances, rituals, or public declarations of faith, but by the congruence between our inner being and our external actions. The creative implications of bringing forth what is within you extend far beyond psychological health into the realm of authentic self-expression and cultural renewal. Throughout history, periods of great cultural flourishing have occurred when individuals were encouraged to manifest their unique inner gifts and visions. The Renaissance, for example, was characterized by the celebration of individual creative expression after centuries of more collective, institutionally controlled artistic production. Similarly, indigenous traditions worldwide often recognize that each person comes into the world with a unique medicine or gift that the entire community needs. This perspective suggests that the suppression of authentic self-expression isn't just personally destructive, but collectively impoverishing. What might have been contributed to human culture and understanding is lost when individuals are forced to conform to external expectations rather than manifesting their inner truth. When examined alongside cross-cultural shamanic and mystical traditions, this teaching takes on even greater significance. In many indigenous healing traditions, illness, both individual and collective, is understood to result from aspects of soul or spirit that have been denied expression or banished from consciousness. Healing involves retrieving these lost aspects and reintegrating them into wholeness. Similarly, many mystical traditions speak of the spiritual journey as one of removing veils or obstacles to the expression of one's true nature rather than acquiring something new or becoming something different. What's striking about Jesus' formulation in the Gospel of Thomas is how it unites psychological wholeness, spiritual realization, and authentic creative expression into a single, powerful principle. What is within must be brought forth, or it becomes destructive. This holistic understanding transcends the modern compartmentalization of psychology, spirituality, and creativity into separate domains. We are simultaneously physical and spiritual beings, and both aspects are sacred. Extreme materialism that denies the spiritual dimension and escapist spiritualism that rejects the material world are equally imbalanced. The middle path, the integration of these polarities, is what Jesus seems to point to as the path to completeness. If they say to you, "Where did you come from?" say to them, "We came from the light, from the place where the light, by itself, came into being and established itself." If they ask you, "What is the sign of your Father in you?" say to them, "It is movement and repose." Movement and repose, another duality to be integrated. Action in the world and the stillness of contemplation, engagement with material reality and withdrawal into spiritual essence. These are not opposite paths, but complementary aspects of a full life. Like the yin-yang symbol, where each polarity contains the seed of its opposite, and together they form the whole. Our origin, says Jesus, is the light that came into being by itself. We were not created as servants or subordinates, but as natural expressions of primordial consciousness, like rays emanating from the sun of divinity. And that light is not distant. It is our own essential nature, always accessible when we silence the noise of the conditioned mind. The disciples asked, "When will the kingdom come?" Jesus replied, "It will not come by waiting for it. It will not be a matter of saying, 'Here it is,' or 'There it is.' Rather, the kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and people do not see it." Spiritual realization is not a future event, not a post-death reward, not something to be achieved in a specific location. It is a present reality, available right now, spread out upon the earth, but invisible to eyes that have been trained not to see. Spiritual clairvoyance isn't about developing paranormal powers, but about removing the veils of conditioning that prevent us from perceiving what has always been before us. We now enter the deepest dimension of Jesus' teachings, where truth transcends words and becomes direct experience. The Gospel of Thomas is not a text to be merely read or intellectually interpreted. It is a portal to a different form of knowledge, what the Gnostics called gnosis, direct experiential knowledge, as opposed to mere belief or second-hand information. When Jesus says, "Recognize what is in your sight, and that which is hidden from you will become plain to you," he is indicating a form of perception that goes beyond discursive thought. It is an invitation to full presence, to pure attention, that transcends the constant mental commentary on reality. In this state of direct perception, without the interference of conceptual thought, a dimension of existence normally hidden by our habitual perceptual filters is revealed. Become passers-by. This short instruction contains profound wisdom about the nature of identity. Our tendency is to fix ourselves in rigid self-concepts, in stories about who we believe we are. Jesus suggests a fluid, unattached identity that flows through life's experiences without crystallizing into a definitive form. Like water that takes the shape of the container without losing its essential nature, our consciousness can experience multiple forms of being without exclusively identifying with any of them. This teaching of becoming passers-by resonates deeply with quantum physics and modern understanding of consciousness in ways that would have been impossible to articulate in the first century. Quantum mechanics reveals that at the subatomic level, particles exist as probabilities rather than fixed entities until they're observed, suggesting that reality itself has a fluid, unfixed quality until consciousness interacts with it. The observer effect in quantum physics implies that consciousness and reality are inextricably linked, not separate domains. When Jesus encourages us to become passers-by, he may be pointing to this fundamental truth, that our identification with fixed forms is an illusion, and our true nature more closely resembles the fluid, observing consciousness that witnesses and participates in reality's unfolding without being bound by any particular manifestation of it. This perspective offers a profound reconciliation of ancient wisdom with cutting-edge science, suggesting that the mystical insights of traditions like Gnosticism were not primitive superstitions, but sophisticated intuitions about the nature of reality that science is only now beginning to verify. The cultural and historical significance of this non-attachment to identity becomes clearer when we consider the socio-political context of Jesus' time. Roman-occupied Judea was a society defined by rigid hierarchies and fixed social identities. One's worth and rights were determined by factors of birth, ethnicity, tribe, gender, and social class. By teaching his followers to become passers-by, Jesus was not only offering spiritual wisdom, but subtly undermining the entire social structure of his era. This teaching implies that our true identity transcends all socially constructed categories, a radical proposition in any era, but particularly revolutionary in ancient times. The political implications would have been clear to Roman authorities, who relied on maintaining strict social boundaries to control their vast empire. A movement based on fluid identity and recognition of divine consciousness in all beings would naturally tend toward egalitarianism and resistance to arbitrary authority, precisely the qualities that made early Christianity both appealing to the marginalized and threatening to the powerful. We're approaching the deepest revelations of this ancient knowledge, and if you're feeling that these words are touching something within you, consider this a sign that you're among those who are ready to receive these truths. Our community is growing rapidly, formed by seekers like you who intuit that there's more to spirituality than what we've been taught. Become part of this movement now. Subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and don't forget to leave in the comments which of these revelations resonated with you the most. Your comments inspire new content that will continue deepening these teachings. Now let's explore the final layer of these secret teachings. Jesus' teachings in the Gospel of Thomas don't promote a philosophy of world denial, but a different way of inhabiting it, with full awareness, inner freedom, and authenticity. It's not about escaping material reality, but perceiving it from a deeper dimension, recognizing its nature as a manifestation of consciousness. Jesus said, "Images are manifest to man, but the light in them is concealed. In the image of the light of the Father it will be revealed, and his image will be concealed by his light." This enigmatic passage points to an inversion of common perception. What we normally consider real, the physical world, is just the surface, the image or manifestation. The deeper reality is the light of consciousness that animates and permeates all forms. In spiritual awakening, this light becomes so dominant that material forms lose their apparent solidity and autonomy. They reveal themselves as expressions of this primordial light. The final message of the Gospel of Thomas is not one of separation, between the spiritual and the material, between the sacred and the profane, between the divine and the human. It is a message of non-duality, of recognition of the fundamental unity of all existence. Jesus didn't come to divide humanity between saved and condemned, but to awaken all to the truth of their original divine nature. We thus arrive at the core of what was suppressed, not just an alternative set of beliefs, but a complete revolution in how we relate to spirituality, not as followers, but as direct expressions of the divine, not as sinners awaiting redemption, but as beings of light, temporarily forgetful of their true nature. Why were these teachings so threatening to the religious establishment that was forming? Because they eliminated the need for intermediaries, because they returned spiritual power to the individual, because they transformed the relationship with the divine from fearful submission to loving recognition. But the time of concealment has come to an end. Today, these texts resurface not just as historical curiosities, but as precious maps for our own journey of self-discovery. The Gospel of Thomas, along with other Gnostic texts, offers a glimpse of what Christianity could have been, and what it can still become if we return to its deepest roots. This knowledge doesn't belong to any specific religion. It is the spiritual heritage of all humanity. And now, after centuries in the shadows, these lights are again available to illuminate our collective path toward awakening. The question that remains is, are we ready to take responsibility for our own divinity? If these revelations touched something deep within you, if you felt that these words are more than information, they are a call, an awakening, then you are part of a spiritual lineage that transcends religions and dogmas. A lineage of truth seekers that has remained alive for millennia, despite all attempts to silence it. This is just the beginning of a much deeper journey. In the next video, we'll explore how to apply these teachings in your daily life, transforming not just your intellectual understanding, but your lived experience of reality. To ensure you don't miss any part of this transformative series, subscribe now, activate all notifications, share with those you love, and leave your comment below. Tell me, which revelation touched your heart the most today? Remember, knowledge that is not shared remains sterile. By liking, commenting, and sharing, you become an active part of the rediscovery and dissemination of these ancient truths that have the power to liberate humanity. Until our next meeting, keep your light shining. And remember, the kingdom is within you, waiting to be recognized.